This is the most exciting puzzle to try to solve ever. And I'm really enjoying doing it. So first I see the light at the end of the tunnel, so I'm just gonna lean into this, and then it starts working. So I'm just gonna lean super hard into this. The name of the game at that point in your career is just trying to extend your career as long as possible, which means you need to preserve capital forever, pretty much. I was looking forward to the end of the weekend of I get to do it again tomorrow. And I had that feeling on steroids my first year for sure, even though I wasn't making money.
Hello, and welcome to the Trader's Journey for Investors Underground. In this episode, it's an honor for me to get to share with you my recent conversation with Dan Beardsley. Dan is an elite-level trader with over a decade of trading experience, and much of that inside the halls of one of the most respected proprietary trading firms in the United States. There, he enjoyed multiple seven-figure years. Dan and I recently met up in Florida, and he was gracious enough to share the details of his trading journey. We talk about everything from data collection and analysis, building a robust playbook, hoping to avoid burnout, mentoring other traders, and building a sustainable life beyond the screens. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Dan, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
Yeah. So, Dan, I love to start by just asking, how did you first get interested in the world of trading? Do you remember that first moment when you learned about the stock market and trading, and what was that like for you?
Sure. I don't really have a good entry to trading story. I sort of was just a finance major in college for no good reason. It just seemed practical. And then took a couple markets related courses and sort of started getting minorly interested. And then as one does, started just taking stupid shots in options trades with $20 at a time. And it was all right, I guess this seems kind of interesting. So that was an initial little spark. And then I really didn't get super interested in trading until actually the recruiter from the prop firm that I worked at came to my college to randomly do interviews. And I was just sort of interviewing for everything at the time and talked to him. And he made it sound like the most interesting, greatest job in the world. So he did his job really well of selling it to me. And I was like, all right, let me try this. And then I guess the rest is history. Just went from there.
That's great. Were you trading in college, outside of classes on your own sort of retail account and your own money?
Technically, yes, but definitely not successfully, and not a ton of frequency either. I made maybe 5 trades before I started trading as my post-college job. Literally just stupid option trades of I'm gonna get rich off of this, and then you just lose $50 at a time, which is crushing at the time. But definitely didn't do any real trading before starting up after college.
What drew you to the idea of a prop firm versus trying to maybe do something else in finance? Was there enough of a passion and interest from trading on your own that you thought, this is definitely the route that, you wanted to go with your finance degree? And what was the early days of the prop firm like?
I sort of lucked into trading, actually. I've really, just because that's what college kids think is cool, is I wanted to do investment banking, when I first started doing finance stuff. So I was you can make an easy 100K or whatever the salary is. And everyone makes it sound so glamorous of that's the prestigious job to get. And then maybe fortunately, it was tough to get higher end investment banking jobs. So I sort of was looking at other stuff. And then again, sort of lucked into discovering trading and prop trading. And obviously I landed at Trillium, which was the luckiest thing of my entire life. Super, super lucky. But the beginning of trading, I think you asked the beginning of my prop trading career. It was awesome and really validating of my choice to land there. Of every day I looked forward to going into work. I've never in my life gotten the Sunday scaries that people get end of the weekend, oh man, Monday's coming, I have to go into work. Forever, pretty much, I was looking forward to the end of the weekend of I get to do it again tomorrow. And I had that feeling on steroids my first year for sure, even though I wasn't making money. It was just this is the most exciting puzzle to try to solve ever. And I'm really enjoying doing it. So yeah, it was a really exciting intro to trading and really validating, where it was just super, super exciting all the time. And I felt like I always saw the light at the end of the tunnel, even though it took a while to come. I don't know. It just felt like really, really exciting. So I was lucky that I stumbled into it.
And what was that first year like? Because, everybody kind of has their ideas of what trading might be like, and especially like at a prop firm with other people, see some people really knock it out of the park, see some people struggle. Everybody that I've talked to tends to have a different first year. What was it like for you? Were you seeing glimpses of, break even, glimpses of profitability?
My first year, let's see. So naturally you walk in the door as anybody does, whether it's at a prop firm or just trading on your own. And you're like, I'm going to make $1 million like immediately. Like I'm just going to be the one who figures this out and it's going to be awesome. So that was my mindset going in, and shockingly it didn't work out that way. I think I was like slowly bleeding money the first few months. Fortunately, like realized early on, and it's sort of the firm culture there that they teach you like to size small when you start, because this is the worst you'll ever be at trading. So sort of like in anticipation of consistently losing money, try to do it on a small scale. So I was doing that for a bunch of months. I didn't really get like, I mentally felt flashes of like, I might be making progress, but it definitely wasn't reflected P&L wise until maybe like 9 months in, I would say, where I started like stringing together some trades that I'd been working really hard on for months and months. Which, you start working on the trades and you're like, I think I have it. I think I have it. And then it still is like a process of actually executing on it. So I went through a multi-month period of like that, which is really frustrating, of like, I know how to do it and I know that I can do it, but I'm like not quite doing it. So yeah, it probably wasn't until like the 9 months mark I started actually like semi doing it. And having some like actual P&L flashes of like, maybe it's working. And then didn't really start like consistently doing well until definitely like over a year in, maybe 14 months, I started like actually scaling some good trades. And then I'd say the actual breakthrough was like 18 months of like consistently like executing really well on stuff.
Okay.
Which is faster than most, but it still felt like forever at the time of like, this is never going to happen.
Right. It definitely takes time to find your bearings, find your style, and then be able to execute on that style. It's a lot.
For sure. The lag between when I mentally thought I figured it out of like, I should be making money now, until when I actually started executing, there's probably like a full year in between those moments of like, I know what to do, I just can't quite do it yet. Which is a frustrating year of like, you see the light at the end of the tunnel, but you like can't quite push through.
Do you remember the trade or that time period, the type of trade that it was when it really clicked for you and you realized, okay, I might have something here. I might be able to do this and do it profitably in the long term? Do you kind of remember that moment?
Yeah, definitely. Most of what I focused on at the time was like news trading. Because that was like the prevalent style of trading at Trillium in that period, and sort of, at least from what I can remember, what was working best in the market at that time. It wasn't like a super volatile market or anything for the most part, outside of maybe like biotech. So for the most part, people were just like crushing new stuff. So fortunately, I lucked into like sitting near some other traders where I could see that they were like crushing it and doing really well. And so I could just sort of look over their shoulder and be like, I know that they made money in this thing. Let me like reverse engineer whatever they did and try to follow down that path. And also that style of trading just sort of like clicked with me and my personality, which is important too. So yeah, definitely news trading was the first thing where I'm just like, I see a route to success here. So I'm just going to like lean in super hard to figuring this thing out. And then, yeah, that was like the first glimmer I had. And then also the first big trade I had was news.
And were you, trading options at the time? Because I know you mentioned that that's how you started, was trading options. When you were at the firm, were you still doing options plays, or were you mostly stocks, equities, and trading like that? Or was it both?
Yeah, we actually were only like equities and ETFs and stuff at the time that I started. And for actually like many years after that, we were just exclusively equities. So no options whatsoever, just straight stocks.
What would you say was your, bread and butter type of trading style? Was it news plays? Did it evolve into more than that over time? Sort of what's the trajectory of your trading evolution and the types of plays that you were finding success with?
News was the predominant strategy for me for at least the first few years of like, first I see the light at the end of the tunnel, so I'm just going to lean into this, and then it starts working, so I'm just going to lean super hard into this. Like, whether it's like imposter syndrome or like I just don't think market conditions are going to last that long, I'm like, let me just like pile into this while it's working and make hay while the sun is shining, or whatever the saying is. So I pretty much just focused on new stuff for a while, and then sort of slowly realized that like I might be able to figure it out and make it last longer than I initially thought. So then you start adding stuff to your playbook and practicing other styles and stuff. So, you slowly add in just like order flow stuff and macro stuff and bigger picture stuff. But definitely for the first, like, I don't know, at least the first several years, it was pretty much exclusively new stuff that I was doing well in.
If you're looking for ways to take your trading to the next level, then Investors Underground might have something to offer. You'll have access to courses and mentors to learn from, some of the best technology available for scanning stocks and breaking news, and access to the chat rooms, where you'll find a vibrant community of focused traders who share their trade ideas in real time each day. Members also have access to the morning broadcasts, where the IU moderators share their trade ideas for the day ahead during the pre-market session. Members have access to the midday study sessions with Stan, the midweek study sessions with Sam, webinars, moderator watch lists, and all the other resources that Investors Underground has to offer. Listeners of The Trader's Journey can access exclusive membership deals available at investorsunderground.com/journey. And now, back to our episode with Dan Beardsley. What advice would you give to people who are still trying to find their style, or they think they know what their style is, they're just not fully executing the way that they probably should to get the profits? What would you tell them in terms of being able to find their style and what works for them based on what you've experienced?
My advice to people like starting out is trade as small as possible. Just again, like I said, like this is going to be the worst you ever are at trading. So like the name of the game at that point in your career is just like trying to extend your career as long as possible, which means you need to preserve capital and not like blow yourself out before your career even starts really. In terms of finding your style, I always tell people like it's just a giant game of guess and check, where you like if you really don't have something you can consistently make money in, or even if you do, like you should just be trading everything with small size and just creating like a huge data set of different categories of trades, and tracking P&L and like consistently writing them up and everything, just to sort of have evidence of like what is showing a glimmer of hope, like what definitely isn't working you need to cut out. But for a long time it's just guess and check of like, let me try 100 things and see like after a couple months or a few months, like if I see a path to success in any of these things. And then like when that glimmer of hope comes up, and it should be evidence-based of like, per the data, this is starting to work. Then I would just focus like a ton of my resources into scaling that and like properly figuring it out. But before that, it's just guess and check, and you got to sort of try a bunch of things.
I love that you brought up data, because there's a lot of people who, might say they're discretionary traders and they maybe have a mental list of what trades they took, but, actually tracking the data is a whole other depth of understanding your trading and where you might be finding edge versus where you think you might be finding edge. So what type of data were you tracking? How extensive was that? How were you going through your trade reviews? And what would you say helped make you better, from month one to year one to 18 months in? What were some of the types of work that you were putting in, and how much work were you putting in to grow yourself as a trader and get better?
In terms of tracking stuff, I mean, I tracked everything, and I have my whole career. Whether it's like, I have a massive Evernote thing with like every single strategy I've ever participated in, with a zillion examples and write-ups and screenshots of all of those, just, 12 years of history at this point, which is awesome for like, it's still useful now. If some setup pops up, I can be like, this is what happened last time this happened, da da da. So that's like a really valuable database just to have. Otherwise, and also just to go back to that point, in terms of like reviewing, it's also really important to have written up like your thoughts at the time something was happening, because then you can go back with a clear mind, like the following weekend or a month from then or a year from then or whatever, and go back and with sort of like an unbiased view, and sort of see more clearly where you were wrong and what you were thinking, and sort of how to tinker with that going forward. Beyond just like write-ups and logging all that stuff, I mean, I've tracked, like, I have an insane amount of stuff that I've tracked just from like, there's a zillion like ratios and stats that you can track from your trading. And I've pretty much tracked like probably everyone that you can name. And again, I have like an Excel sheet with 12 years worth of monthly data in it, that I think has been super important just in terms of like consistently keeping me pointed in the right direction. It's really easy, especially over a longer time frame, to sort of let stuff slip, and stop working so hard at stuff, which makes it really easy in my experience to sort of get pointed off track, or you just get sloppy. So I think tracking that stuff is super important. And then beyond that, I've also tracked just like, I mean, people like Lance and stuff have beaten this into the grounds, as they should have. It's really important. But I've tracked like sleep relative to P&L, everything, like time of day of the trade, day of the week, just a zillion different like potential confounding variables, that I found super important in terms of just like narrowing down what's working and what's not working. And it's important to review that stuff super frequently to sort of catch it early, when stuff's slipping.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's certain variables that might matter more to one person and one type of trader, and another individual might be completely different, So for example, I've talked to a couple people who say like sleep is the thing that they need. Like the sleep is the thing they could do without less like walks during the middle of the day. But if they focus on getting at least like 8 hours of sleep, solid sleep, they're good. Versus, if they get 4 or 5 hours, they don't trade as much that day, or they don't trade at all. So I think it's a good point to understand, and track not just your trades, but track yourself, because it's valuable data. After all, you're the one they're executing.
For sure. It's very easy to lie to yourself and be like, I went out last night and didn't sleep, but I remember this other time I did that and I had this massive trade, so it doesn't matter to me and I'm just going to keep trading as normal. Whereas you've erased from your memory like the 50 other times you did that and took paper cuts like over and over and over that completely negated the easy trade that you did well in. So yeah, it's very easy to lie to yourself. It's very hard to go against the data of like, if it's telling you that these are the expected results with X amount of sleep or whatever your metric is, it's sort of like screaming in your face of this is what you need to do and not do, which I've found, at least for my personality and the way I operate, I've found that really helpful, of just having like irrefutable evidence of this is what you need to do, this is what you need to not do, given X circumstances.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, if you could go back to the start of your trading, that first year, that first and second year, with all of the wisdom that you have now, all of that experience, what advice would you give to yourself, knowing what you might have needed then versus what you have found success with now? What would you say to yourself in terms of trying to make that curve a lot faster, or to find success in trading?
I think oddly, a lot of my advice would be, you're putting an insane amount of your life into trading, which is super, super important in terms of getting good and all that stuff. It's sort of hard to do that without putting your life into it for at least some period of time. My advice would be to find a way to do that while still like maintaining balance and not having that be your entire life. It's just sort of an unsustainable, for most people. There are some people who just like live and breathe trading, and that works for them. For me, living and breathing trading was awesome, but I think looking back, it like it for sure made me burn out at certain points in my career. But also just the way I was approaching it was, like I said, unsustainable and sort of made it hard to keep up with like the long-term work you need to do to keep the results flowing. In terms of trading stuff, I don't know. I think I was like oddly ahead of my time in terms of doing really well at like realizing how important sleep was. So I was like really good at adjusting my habits to maximize that. In terms of like at 22 and 23 years old, I was like sleeping with my phone out of the room. Like I rigged my whole apartment to sort of be like the perfect sleep setup. I had really good habits like sleep wise and data wise and review wise and stuff. So yeah, I think for me personally, it would be mostly just like finding other stuff outside of trading.
What was one of the things that you think might have been not necessarily your Achilles heel, but maybe like a weak spot or a blind spot? And I know you mentioned, balance between trading and other things. In terms of the trading, was there anything that you over the years were able to really, really increase and a weakness that you had?
My weakness historically trading wise has always been when I'm trying to learn a new trade. I trade it as if the data is telling me I've already mastered this trade and should already be in the scaling phase of this. So the second I get like, I think I'm better at this now. Historically, the second I got like a glimmer of hope that this could be working, I would just be like max size, like immediately.
Yeah.
And it's definitely going to work. Even though like I hadn't yet proven that this was like a positive EV trade for myself. So I definitely took like a ton of bigger than necessary losses while I should have still been in like the small size learning phase of a new type of trade, which I think is a common problem of you just get sort of like cocky or overconfident. Once you figured out one thing, you're like, I'm the king of the market now. Like I've figured out trading. This is awesome. And then you get humbled really quickly. So that was definitely a big problem of mine of just like bombing into stuff that I shouldn't have been doing that yet.
Are there any rules that you started to implement and put into place in terms of how you will either introduce a new play or setup into your playbook and then start to execute it? Like, is there like a best practices guide for doing that you would recommend to anybody listening?
I haven't quite figured out like a firm, like quantitative rule yet for that type of issue. For me, basically, I've largely solved it just through like data tracking. I just have like a big enough sample set now where, and it's like very, very specific based on categories and subcategories of trades and all these different variables, where it's like the evidence is very clear if this is, and I have like the expected value for every single one of those things. So it's like, I can see in front of me if the expected value is like one of these super high categories, like I'm going to pile into it. If it's more marginal, like I'll size it, X amount smaller. And then if it's one of these that like my brain is telling me I love this trade, but the numbers are all red in my data, it's like you just sort of have to be disciplined and not touch it. Or if you like are really addicted to trading and can't not touch it, just trade it with like 100 shares or something. I think, being disciplined is the proper approach there and not trading it. But yeah, just, again, for me, it's just always been data and data tracking and just having the numbers in my face of like, it clearly works or it clearly doesn't work, or it's in the middle and size based on that.
I think that's a great idea to think about using some of the data to determine whether or not you're going to go big size, especially when you're trying to build out a new play or something.
For sure.
In terms of today, we're recording this in mid-April 2025. Where are you finding edge in the markets as of recent?
So yeah, like you said, we're recording this like the week after all the tariff craziness happens and the 90-day pause and all that stuff. I think I'm finding edge like where most people are, just in market volatility. It's been a really insane month. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's been like, I need to phrase this properly. I think most experienced traders would agree that it's been a relatively easy trading month, or at least a big opportunity trading month. Newer traders probably disagree and think like they're just going to get their head blown off every single day. So for people who have been trading for a while, I think there have been a lot of big opportunities, and I've been finding opportunities and edge like in the same places most people have this month, which is just like these enormous market moves based on like these true social posts, or just like things getting overextended and reversing, which it's not a trade I used to be good at, like the general volatility, but it's one of those things like, from years 4 to 12 over my career, I've like worked into my playbook. But yeah, that's the medium length answer to the question of just general volatility and tariff stuff, I think has been the easy trade this month.
Yeah. I've heard from traders with lots of experience, decade of experience, who are really enjoying this market for all of the intraday possibilities and doing very little in terms of like swinging.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of swing traders I know that have lamented as well that it's really hard to have confidence and conviction to hold anything overnight, because just one headline can completely turn your position upside down.
For sure. And that's the same with like a lot of the people I know who work at like big hedge funds and stuff too, is they're all just trying to limit exposure, because you don't know if, all it takes is one tweet or true social post or whatever of like your world is just going to get flipped upside down overnight when you're sleeping. So yeah, I think a lot of people are just trying to like limit exposure when they're not 2 feet away from the screen. Because it's tough to be in that situation.
What are some of your goals in terms of trading, but also, building a sustainable life around trading? What is possibly a goal for, 2-3 years out? Do you even think about it in terms of that? Or do you think about just focus on today, focus on this week, and the rest will come when it comes?
No, I've actually been trying really hard to figure that part out. That was part of the reason I left the prop firm that I was at and sort of stopped trading super full time, and now just trade on my own like sporadically, is I really wanted to focus on like having trading be a much smaller part of my life. So I've actually been working with Dr. Crawford a lot, to try to like figure that part out, which is really hard after putting everything into trading and having that be like the thing in my life for a long time. I'm sure if anyone's talked to traders trying to like quit or trade less, I think there's close to a 0% success rate of people like doing that on the first try. It's just a tough thing to reverse, and all your muscle memory is like built into these routines of being at the screens all the time and da-da-da. So yeah, for me, I'm just trying to like very strictly have rules of like, I'm only trading during these hours and I need to be doing these things during these other hours. And, again, it just depends on like your interests of how you want to fill those times. For me, I'm just trying to focus on being outside, taking advantage of being in Florida where it's nice all the time. And just sort of like forcibly making trading not like the overwhelming activity of my life.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, because especially with modern times, 2025 April, like we're mentioning, it's really, really enticing to, if you're looking for volatility, if you're looking for, that next trade. I think there's no shortage of opportunities to do that. But it also doesn't mean that it's going to be a trade that is in your playbook with just this much volatility and uncertainty happening. So, I mean, to those who have been around this type of market before, definitely opportunities. But I think you bring up a great point, which is there's other things besides trading, right? At some point, there's going to be life events that happen. Like, how hard are you going to be grinding? For how long are you planning to do that sort of thing?
And this probably only applies to like a very small subset of people, but once you have like a successful career and have been doing it for a long time, I think if you look at like older traders who have been doing it for a really long time, the people who you can tell have like stayed in that lane of like trading is my entire life and this is all I'm doing. At least for me, that wasn't like an enviable life to pursue of like, I still want to be here when I'm like 50 or 60 and my life still looks exactly like this. So yeah, I don't know. I think just for me personally, there's a middle ground to be struck of like where I can look back. I still enjoy trading, and all that stuff. I think there's just like a future where trading isn't my entire life, where I can like be pleased that where looking forward, I'd be pleased that my life's turning out that way with sort of a better balance.
And when you look at your trading as a whole, what do you think is probably like your strongest attributes, where you have the most edge just naturally as a trader?
I think still new stuff, outperform the average trader. Just a lot of that's just experience. Like I've been doing that and writing that up and reviewing it for a long time at this point. So I just have so many more reps than most people in terms of that style of stuff and like knowing what type of moves to expect given X news item. So I think I still do well in that stuff. Otherwise, I think I have gotten to the point where I put in the same basket of outperformance. Like, I don't know how to categorize it verbally, but the style of trading we've seen this month with the tariff stuff, I just call it like panic markets. So we had like the bank crisis in 2023. We have the tariff stuff going on now. We had like the carry trade blow up in August of 2024. Those just like outlier volatility markets, I definitely outperform in. And then otherwise, I would say the third like style of trades that I get really excited trading and do well in is big like exhaustion gaps, sort of like the micro strategy thing from the end of 2024, the super micro SMCI thing beginning of 2024. That style of just like blowout and reversal. I would say those are the three baskets of stuff like I get excited in the morning for.
Okay. On your charts, what does it look like? Are you using any specific technical indicators? Do you try to keep it simple? What does that all look like,
I try to keep it simple. Historically, for the first like 60% of my career, I had like a tick chart up. Like I didn't even use bars. It was just ticks, which is, I guess in retrospect, like insane to use. And I don't think any technical indicators. It was just ticks. And like, I'm just gonna do it. And that worked fine. Now, in an effort to not just be like staring at every tick, I've graduated to 2-minute bars, which is big development.
That's big.
Yeah. And then, I use like Bollinger Bands and view up. Now those are the two big ones. And I'll look at various like moving averages, just as general data points, but Bollinger Bands and like intraday view up are the two big ones I use. And for the most part, I use them as like loss avoidance indicators of like don't counter this. Like it's clearly trending the other way. Just like be patient and wait until you're sort of going with the market. That's been a big source of like disciplinary failures is like, especially for me, once I got to the point of like, I'm making money. I think I'm just good at everything now is like, this is dumb. I'm just going to be in this for size. Like it's going to go the other way. And timing is 90% of trading. Especially if you're like intraday trading, you sort of need to be right very quickly. So yeah, for the most part, I use that stuff as like loss avoidance strategies, which is good.
If someone is just getting started in trading or they're not consistently profitable and they're trying to get sort of like a baseline for education, what maybe books or courses or anything like that would you point them towards that was, helpful for you, or do you think really is beneficial for people to put their time and energy into learning?
Books, I always say the Market Wizards series were like the most instrumental books that I read. None of them are super directly applicable to like short-term trading per se, but I think if you just like look for it, the similarities are pretty obvious. it like at the very least in terms of like risk management strategies and discipline and just sort of like thinking about the market. Even like the original Market Wizards books from decades ago, like the concepts they talk about are super important just in terms of like being with the trend, risk management, like hitting your routes. Yeah, that for sure is like by far my number one answer is the Market Wizards books. In terms of courses, I don't know that much about like the various courses out there. I'll say he's not paying me to say this, but Lance is a crazy, amazing trader, and equally important, like a really good communicator and teacher. I know that from experience. Like he's helped me a lot too. So I am a subscriber of his course, and it's awesome. And I think that's a great starting point for anyone looking to trade, or like even if you've been trading for a zillion years. I think his course is awesome and super valuable. So that's the one that I'll shout out. Otherwise, I just don't have enough information about other courses out there.
Absolutely. And in terms of, community and getting feedback, what has been some of the biggest takeaways, whether it's in prop firm or just, pals that you have who are traders, how important is it to have a group, a pod, someone that you could go to and talk about your trading or to show them your trades to get feedback about that, over the course of your career? What role has that played for you?
It's insanely important. I got super, super lucky of just being at Trillium and in a prop firm setting. You sort of are like forcibly sat near like in a row of traders, many of whom are like super, super good. So that just like, even if they're not directly talking to you and like teaching you one-on-one, just having that exposure of like, I can see what these people are trading and I can see how much they're making in these trades. So just in terms of like setting your expectations and sort of setting your paths to like things to strive for and what's possible, I think that's super important. Of like, I don't know if I was starting out on my own, I would even know that was possible, of like doing this well in these trades. So I think that forced me to sort of scale up quickly. And then back to your actual question of working in groups and being in pods and stuff. Again, crazy important. And again, from being in a prop setting, I got super lucky of like having a natural group of people who started with me or within a similar starting point of me. People to work with and go over trades at the end of every day and sort of learn new styles of trades and all that stuff. I think it accelerated my career 1,000 times faster. It's just impossible to get everything yourself and discover everything yourself and figure it out all on your own. There for sure are people who have done that. But I think for the average person, working in a group is going to make it like, again, 1,000 times easier. Another sort of important thing of working in a group is, I think, at least in my experience, it makes it like more fun and easier to do it for a long time versus if you're doing it by yourself, it just sort of is like monotonous and feels like homework at points, versus just from a human nature, like perspective, working in a group, I think just makes it more fun, and less like homework. And, it's easier to keep going for a while. If you're just like hanging with your friends, talking trading.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just talking to a trader at Trillium, and they were bringing up the same thing. It's a lot more fun when you're able to, or at least they have very fond memories of trading on the desk during certain great news events and being able to just watch people really knock it out of the park, see people doing some goofy stuff and having fun, having a great time and things like that. And also learning from people, being able to just, watch what someone traded, how they traded it, and learning from them in that way.
For sure. Like my first at least 2 years, it would be the same group of us like there on Sundays, sort of doing review work together. And also like at the end of the day, every weekday, it's like every trading day too, of just sort of like combining brain power of like, what was a good trade that this really good guy in your road did? That's crazy. I've never heard of that before. Like, let me go back and reverse engineer how this works. And then 3 weeks later or 3 months later or whatever, it's a new play in my playbook that I would have never even known existed had I not like been in a group and had someone bring that up. So yeah, just especially like at the early stages of your career, when you're really just trying to figure it out, I think like crowdsourcing that guess and check process, again, just makes it like so much faster and easier of just like aggregating information.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the idea of combining brain power in that way.
Yeah.
You know, trading's hard enough on your own. If you're able to get some people that, you know, around you, surround yourself with great traders, people who can teach you things, and you guys can work together to figure things out. I think it makes a lot of sense for people to try to find that.
For sure. And even like where I am now, I've been trading for a long time, and it's still so easy to miss like X item of news came out during the day, like X trade happened, da, da, da. There's so many things that are just really easy to miss if you're just trying to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
I think no matter where you are, it's super, super important to just have like cast a wide net, which is easiest by just being with other people.
So last question, or it's a two-parter.
Sure.
So for those people who are struggling trading and not where they want to be, or they're not consistently profitable, whatever the case is, what general piece of advice would you give to them? And for the people who are doing well in this market and are doing well, what would you tell them in terms of something to keep in mind?
I'll start with the second part of the question of if you're doing well, and especially if this is your first time like really breaking out and doing well trading, you need to like, it's really easy once you start making money to stop the processes that got you to that point. It's really easy of like, sort of like I said, of like, oh, I figured it out. Now I don't need to be logging all this data. I don't need to be like reviewing every day. I don't need to do my weekend stuff anymore. That's a really easy trap to fall into. And it 99% of the time will lead to a big hole in the near to medium term future. I've seen that so many times, and definitely done it to myself before, of like, shockingly, when you stop like trading is really, really hard. And it's not something where like, oh, I made it, I can start doing half of the work and I'll still make like the same money or even half of the money. It's like, I stopped doing the work and like, it's going to completely stop working for most people. So I would say keep in mind, like if you've started to make money or do well, you need to be doing the work to realize and have it in your face of like, the crazy market has stopped and I need to stop trading as if it still exists. A lot of people did that like after COVID of like, I'm just going to keep taking massive sides and trading all the time in 2022. And there's so many people who got into massive holes, and some, I'm assuming never came back, of just like getting over your skis and overconfident after a really easy, like volatile market. It's hard to have the discipline to take a step back and realize like when the fun has stopped. Either like when the trading success stops or starts to reverse, like realize you need to cut it off and reevaluate where the market is at. To the first part of your question of what, like if you're still struggling and trying to figure it out, it's still like it's really frustrating if other people are making money and you're still trying to figure it out. Like I think everybody's been there before, and it sucks and it's really demoralizing sometimes. You sort of just need to keep the long game front of mind, and keep doing the things I said before in terms of like, for sure, keep trying to work in a group and do guess and check. And for like now there's so much good information on the internet and on Twitter too, of like really, really good traders posting the write-ups and posting what trades you make. Like that stuff is really easy, of just like, these 3 awesome traders all posted that they made the same trade. Why did they trade that? Like, how can I reverse engineer to add this to my playbook going forward? And again, like you need to keep the long game in mind and trade with small size and not blow yourself up while you're trying to figure that out. But yeah, I don't know. Trading is really competitive and frustrating. And you can make a lot of money doing it. So naturally it's going to be really, really, like it's going to be really competitive and hard to figure out. So you sort of just have to like do the work, unfortunately. And it sucks, and you never really can stop doing the work. Because again, it's competitive and really, really hard to be good at. So you sort of just have to be all in and keep getting after it. And unfortunately, there's not an easy way.
Yeah.
That sucks for a while or forever too. And I don't mean it sucks and like it's not worth doing, but it's just really, really difficult. As are all things that a lot of people want. You know, you just need to realize that there's a lot of people after the same thing, and what's going to separate you from them in terms of like achieving that goal. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to like really, really badly wanting it and putting in the focus work to reflect the fact that you want it that much, which is easier said than done. I think a lot of people like get discouraged or give up. But you just have to realize like, even if it sucks now and if I've been struggling for a year or 2 years or 3 years, like if I keep sort of just like whittling away at this path where like, I know that these are the things I need to be doing. You need to realize like it will pay off X amount of time down the road if you just keep your head down and keep poking out.
It's great advice. And thank you so much for sharing your trading journey with us.
Sure.
Man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Trader's Journey. We have additional episodes we believe you might also like, so don't forget to subscribe. You'll be notified of upcoming releases the moment they're available. Thanks for tuning in.